Montana has a minimally regulated late fee framework, consistent with the state's overall property rights-oriented approach to landlord-tenant regulation. The governing law is found in the Montana Residential Landlord and Tenant Act, Montana Code Annotated Title 70, Chapter 24, along with general contract principles. If you're a landlord or tenant in Montana, the state provides basic landlord-tenant structure, but leaves most late fee specifics to the lease agreement. Let's start with the basics. Montana does not impose a specific statutory dollar cap or percentage cap on late fees. There is no statute that limits the fee to a certain amount or percentage of rent. The fee is governed by the lease terms and general contract principles, specifically the requirement that the fee be reasonable and not function as an unenforceable penalty. Montana does not mandate a grace period by statute. There is no state law requiring a specific number of days before a late fee can be charged. If your lease says rent is due on the first and a late fee applies on the second, that's enforceable. However, standard practice among Montana landlords is to include a grace period of 3 to 5 days, which is considered industry standard and reduces disputes. The key legal principle is reasonableness under Montana contract law. A late fee is a liquidated damages provision, enforceable if the fee represents a reasonable pre-estimate of the landlord's anticipated damages and the actual damages from late payment are difficult to calculate precisely. Montana courts apply the standard two-part test, where the damage is uncertain at the time of contracting and is the fee amount reasonable. A fee that is grossly disproportionate to the landlord's actual costs can be struck down as a penalty. What's reasonable in Montana? The state has a wide range of rental markets, from expensive resort communities to very affordable rural areas. A flat fee of $25 to $60 or a percentage-based fee of 5 to 10% of the monthly rent is generally defensible across most Montana markets. In high-cost markets like Bozeman, higher dollar amounts may be justified. In smaller communities with low rents, fees should be calibrated accordingly. Montana's Unfair Trade Practices and Consumer Protection Act, found in Title 30, Chapter 14, provides a potential enforcement mechanism for late fee disputes. While the Act primarily targets commercial practices, it prohibits unfair or deceptive acts in trade and commerce, which can include residential rental practices in certain circumstances. Systematic overcharging of late fees could be challenged under this framework. The lease must clearly state the late fee terms. The lease should specify the rent due date, any grace period, the exact fee amount or formula, when the fee triggers, whether additional charges apply for continued non-payment, and whether the fee is defined as additional rent. Montana courts expect clear written terms. Oral agreements about late fees are insufficient. Compounding late fees in Montana are governed by the lease and the reasonableness standard. A single one-time fee after the grace period is the simplest and most defensible approach. If your lease includes daily or weekly charges, the total must remain reasonable. Most Montana landlords use a single flat fee, which avoids the complexity and risk of compounding structures. The interaction between late fees and the eviction process in Montana is governed by the Residential Landlord and Tenant Act. Under Montana Code Sections 70 to 24-422, the landlord must provide a 3-day notice for non-payment of rent. If the tenant fails to pay within 3 days, the landlord can proceed with eviction. Montana's 3-day notice period is one of the shortest in the country, meaning the eviction timeline begins almost immediately when rent goes unpaid. The late fee and eviction timelines run nearly in parallel. Whether unpaid late fees can be included in the 3-day notice depends on how the lease defines them. If defined as additional rent, they're includable. Best practice: define late fees as additional rent. The 3-day cure period also means the tenant's window to pay and stop the eviction is very narrow. The cure amount must be accurately calculated, including only compliant late fees. An inflated demand that includes excessive fees gives the tenant grounds to challenge the notice. Montana does not impose a specific statutory cap on the security deposit. The amount is governed by the lease terms. However, the deposit must be returned within 30 days after termination of the tenancy and the tenant's delivery of possession, or within 10 days after the tenant provides a forwarding address, whichever is later. The landlord must provide an itemized statement. Unpaid late fees can be deducted if the lease authorizes it and the fees are reasonable. Failure to return the deposit within the required timeline can result in the landlord forfeiting the right to withhold any portion. For tenants receiving Housing Choice Voucher Assistance, Montana landlords should not charge late fees when the housing authority's portion is delayed due to processing. The tenant cannot control the authority's payment schedule. If the tenant's portion is paid on time, the fee should apply only when the tenant's own payment is actually late. Montana's military population is centered around Malmstrom Air Force Base near Great Falls. Malmstrom is home to the 341st Missile Wing, one of 3 intercontinental ballistic missile wings in the Air Force. The base generates military and civilian rental demand in the Great Falls area. Military pay is predictable, the 1st and 15th, and most military tenants pay reliably. The 3 to 5 day grace period accommodates minor pay processing delays. Montana's unique economic and geographic landscape creates specific late fee considerations that differ from most states. The resort economy is a dominant force in several Montana markets. Bozeman, Big Sky, and Whitefish have experienced explosive growth driven by tourism, remote workers, and quality of life migration. These communities have some of the highest rents in Montana and the tightest housing markets. Late fee enforcement in resort communities is standard, but the strong demand and well-compensated tenant base mean that late payment is relatively uncommon among professional tenants. However, resort communities also employ a large seasonal and service industry workforce: hotel workers, ski resort employees, restaurant staff, construction workers, whose incomes may fluctuate with the tourist season. These workers are essential to the resort economy, but often earn significantly less than the remote work and professional population. Late payment patterns among service workers may correlate with seasonal demand, stronger during peak season, weaker during shoulder seasons. Some resort area landlords offer split lease structures for seasonal workers, with higher rent during peak season when workers earn more from tips and overtime, and lower rent during slower months. This structure reduces late payments by aligning the rent obligation with the tenant's income pattern. Montana's agricultural and ranching economy affects late payment patterns in rural communities. Farmers and ranchers have seasonal income cycles. Cash flow is strongest after harvest or livestock sales and tighter during planting and feeding seasons. Landlords in agricultural communities should understand these cycles and may want to align rent due dates with common income patterns. The energy sector influences late payment dynamics in parts of eastern Montana, particularly in communities near the Bakken Formation that extends from North Dakota. During active drilling periods, energy workers are employed and pay reliably. During downturns, late payments increase. The pattern mirrors what we discussed in our North Dakota video. Landlords in energy-influenced communities should calibrate their expectations to market conditions. From a practical standpoint, Montana's rental market is small and geographically dispersed, with several distinct regional markets. Billings is the state's largest city and primary commercial center. The economy is driven by healthcare, including Billings Clinic and St. Vincent Healthcare, energy services, agriculture, and transportation. Rents in Billings typically range from $800 to $1,300. Most Billings landlords charge flat fees of $35 to $60 with a 5-day grace period. Missoula, home to the University of Montana, has a tight rental market with rents that have increased significantly in recent years. The combination of university demand, healthcare employment, and quality of life appeal has pushed rents above what the city's income levels would traditionally support. Student late payments correlate with financial aid processing at the beginning of each semester. Missoula has been one of the most active Montana communities in discussing tenant protections and housing affordability. While the city hasn't enacted specific late fee restrictions, the political environment signals that landlord practices are subject to increased scrutiny. Missoula landlords should ensure their fee practices are clearly reasonable. Great Falls has a more moderate market influenced by Malmstrom, AFB, healthcare, and agriculture. Military tenants provide a reliable payment base. Helena, the state capital, has a small stable market driven by state government. Bozeman, as discussed, has the most expensive market in the state outside of Big Sky. Kalispell and the Flathead Valley, gateway to Glacier National Park, have a growing market driven by tourism and lifestyle migration. Whitefish has premium rents. Columbia Falls and Hungry Horse have more affordable options for the service workforce. Butte, Havre, Miles City, Glendive, and smaller Montana communities have affordable markets with limited tenant pools. Late fee amounts should reflect the local economic conditions. A fee appropriate for Bozeman's premium market is disproportionate in a community where rents are a third of Bozeman's level. One best practice for Montana landlords: calibrate your late fee to the specific market where your property is located. Montana's rental markets span from expensive resort communities to very affordable small towns, and a one-size-fits-all fee doesn't work. In Bozeman, where rents may exceed $1,500, a fee of $75 to $100 is defensible. In a smaller community where rents are $600, $30 to $40 is more appropriate. Another best practice: include a grace period of at least 3 to 5 days, even though Montana doesn't mandate one. The standard grace period prevents disputes from tenants whose payments are delayed by a day or two due to weekends, holidays, or processing times. 5 days is the most common standard. A third best practice: for properties in resort communities with seasonal workforce tenants, consider your late fee provision in the context of the total housing cost. Service workers earning seasonal wages have less buffer for unexpected expenses. A late fee that's reasonable for a tech worker earning 6 figures may be genuinely burdensome for a ski resort employee earning $30,000. The fee must be reasonable in the context of the specific tenancy, not just reasonable in the abstract. For the complete guide to Montana late fee laws, visit tenantscreeningbackgroundcheck.com. Subscribe to our channel for every state in our late fee law series.